Hi, everyone, and welcome to Newlab's South by Southwest event, Corporate Innovation Through Collaboration with Entrepreneurs. My name is Alexandra Bacchus, and I work on the partnerships team here at Newlab. Today, you'll hear from Sean Stewart, Newlab's CEO, on the state of corporate R&D and what we're working on here at Newlab. For those of you new to Newlab, we're a singular community of experts and innovators, technologists, entrepreneurs, and researchers, all focused on applying transformative technology to things that matter. Today, we're excited to walk you through how our membership and innovation studios support our startup community and facilitate collaboration with civic and corporate industry leaders to find solutions to their challenges and source new business opportunities. We've been around for just over 5 years and have grown to over 160 companies and 850 entrepreneurs. Over 1,700 companies have applied over the years with an acceptance rate hovering around 10%. We have 110,000 square feet of operating space, $7 million worth of prototyping equipment, ranging from wood shops to metal shops, hydroponic systems in our ag tech lab, 3D printing labs, pretty much everything you need to prototype products at the earliest stages. The companies in our community have raised over $700 million over the last 4 years, and we aim to support that growth by working as matchmakers between entrepreneurs and the capital they need from VCs, angel investors, and family offices. The technology disciplines our member companies are working on fall into 8 major categories: robotics and hardware-focused products, material science, computer vision, machine learning, additive manufacturing, and quantum computing. With all that said, the makeup of our community is always changing, but this is a quick snapshot of the percentage of female founders we have, founders coming to us with a master's or doctorate degree, those who have started a company in the past, and a great metric, those who have relocated some or all of their business to join us here in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So I'll pass it on to Sean Stewart, who will take you through some of the projects that we're working on here at Newlab and what we see as the state of corporate R&D.
Lab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. There's 86,000 square feet of space behind us with entrepreneurs and technologists building their early stage companies. But today we want to talk a little about corporate R&D and how our innovation studios support government and corporate initiatives to explore early stage technology and how it can improve their operations, their inefficiencies, or the threats to their business. But let's start with the landscape of what we've all seen over the last decade. The first piece is the declining average age of companies in the S&P 500 and overall the corporate entities out there that dominate in different industries and spaces. 2020 was the first time that the average age of those companies dropped below 20 years, where you're actually starting to see more and more early stage businesses grow and scale into industries and legacy fields typically dominated by larger players. Airbnb is now valued more than Expedia and Priceline combined. Tesla has grown to be a greater entity in valuation than all of the automotive players in the US. There are example after example where new entrances have grown and built innovative products, business models, or technologies to disrupt existing players in their legacy industries. We see that time and time again. Yet what we also notice is that R&D spending across these companies is growing. As a percentage of all different metrics, whether it's sales revenue or overall cost, the amount of money being contributed to innovation and R&D is growing, yet CEOs and executives claim that the alignment between that R&D, between that innovation spend, and their overall strategy and business product continues to distance itself, growing more misaligned. So this is where we started in developing our innovation studio concept. We saw that threats are growing. More and more early stage companies are developing approaches that are challenging for existing players in the industries. You see 3 sectors that dominate in regards to the amount of R&D spend and contributions to innovation, whether it's internal or external from those corporations. But the areas that do dominate and invest significantly in those fields across all metrics of performance, whether it's EBITDA or other financial gauges, continue to outperform the other industries and areas that are investing less in R&D and innovation. And so this is where we started to see the emerging or the ability to learn and innovate through emerging business models and products and technologies that entrepreneurs and startups are building around the world. We feel you can learn from them and experiment with them to improve your own product vision, your own innovation, your own business models. But if they're ignored, they become these companies that end up disrupting and altering the S&P 500 in the way that we explained previously. And so that's what led to our overall structure and the concept of innovation studios as a framework. We looked at the 38,000 startups that have been built over the last 5 years and consider them to be experiments. Corporate companies that are building and testing different products, different technologies, different business models, and pushing the envelope of what's possible in different industries in ways that may have gone ignored in the past. And so it's with that concept that we really started to develop the innovation studio framework that we'll talk about today, which is partnering with these startups around the world to understand what they're doing and learn from it as you pilot and develop together their overall concepts. And so as you look at 2020 and the GDP impact that occurred around the world from the pandemic, one thing that has been consistent historically is that R&D spend has followed that GDP growth, or lack of growth, if you look at last year's example. But the fact remains that startups continue to raise money. Venture capital deployment in 2020 did not decline. It actually accelerated, especially in the Series A and B buckets. And as a result, the question remains, who will benefit from this innovation? Who will access the early stage technology and products coming from these entities if corporations are reducing their spend during this downturn economy? So you can see the venture capital deployment, the amount of investments being made into early stage companies continues to grow. And so our focus is how can you find and partner those corporate entities, the governments that need insights into these new technologies, with the academic researchers, the early stage entrepreneurs and technologists, so that you can understand what they're developing, test it, consider it against your own product and strategy, and how it may support those initiatives. And so our studios, these innovation studios, typically work across a 12-month framework. They're split into 3 major categories, or these 5 key steps that we've articulated here. The first is we kick off and meet with the different stakeholders at the corporate or government body who is sponsoring the studio. We start to understand what their focus areas are, what they're looking to expand upon or investigate or research. What are the threats they're considering to their business? What are the inefficiencies or opportunities that they think we should focus on? That allows us to start building 3 to 5 tracks of focus areas. Mobility is a large topic as an example, but maybe urban charging or electrification is a topic you want to focus on, or maybe battery redesign and reuse is an area to double down on. And so in this first few months of the Innovation Studio, we start to understand what the topics are that we're going to focus on. And then we go out into the world and look at the technology that's being developed. We graphically map investment rounds that have been completed, IP that's been filed, or patents that have been filed, research papers coming out of academia, and start to understand all of the early stage technology that's being developed that could be directly or adjacent to the topic we're focused on. We then also do open calls, allowing startups from around the world to apply to participate and join the studio to test and improve their technology directly with the client. An average studio will see anywhere from 50 to north of 100 different startups around the world apply to be part of that studio to participate with the corporate or government sponsor to build and test the technology. We then work with the client to pick which teams make the most sense for the objectives. We select teams from around the world, and they then join the studio. They convene together to align on the topics of focus, the type of pilots and products we want to develop, and then they start to build. They customize their technology, they alter their product, they build new approaches to their technology specific to the opportunity that the studio and the corporate or government client has articulated. And this work, hand in hand with the client, goes all the way up until the final segment of the studio, which is piloting the technology. Most of our studios have anywhere from 5 to 10 pilots on an annual basis, which allows the corporate or government client to actually see if the technology and the product delivers on its promises. Does it solve the issues that it was originally designed for? Does it actually improve the inefficiencies that have been identified? And that is the key purpose of the studios we operate. We have more than 9 different active studios right now across government and corporate clients. We have the 5G studio right here in New York City in the Brooklyn Navy Yard with Verizon that is testing how edge compute and access to consistent 5G connectivity can improve or alter your product design or the deployment of your technology. We've worked in a lot of legacy industries, like working in the rail industry, looking at track inspection and how you avoid derailments of trains that are operating across the US. We've worked in the mining industry looking at how we can improve the sustainability and safety of iron ore mining operations, specifically in India with our partner Vimson, which operates in mines throughout India with our focus in Goa. Then we also have operations and innovation studios outside of New York, in Detroit, and in partnership with Michigan Central and Ford, looking at mobility solutions around electrification and urban charging. But the studios aren't always focused on corporate initiatives. Many of them are actually government-sponsored. As far off as our Beyond Play studio in Uganda, which is working in the Naka Valley, a large decade-old emergency and refugee housing community, where we're looking at improving all the technology that could raise the quality of life of these emergency and refugee camps. Everything from micro power grids to connectivity systems, how you use alternative building materials and different ways to approach sewerage systems as an example. And last, we've had efforts right here in New York City in partnership with the EDC around urban tech development and deploying pilots throughout New York City, testing new technology to improve urban planning decisions on a daily basis. So as you can see, these studios take the concept of bringing together technologists and entrepreneurs from around the world and allowing them to partner directly with corporate and government bodies who have similar missions and problems to solve. These lead all the way up to pilots that actually stress test the concept and the product and technology developed to see if it actually meets and delivers on its outcome. Our studio clients often look for one of three major outcomes from these. Often they're de-risking investments. They're testing out technology of early stage entrepreneurs to see if they want to invest and support the scaling of that organization and enterprise. In other cases, we see licensing and procurement deals where companies actually team up after the pilots to further scale their product into the organization's overall operations. And the final is that you see licensing arrangements all the way through acquisition of the technology developed in the studio. The technologists involved, the entrepreneurs, they own the IP they developed, which maintains a lower cost of operation for the innovation studios. But the clients have the first rights of refusal to acquire, license, or invest in the outcomes of their studios. So with that, I thank you for joining us today to talk about this exciting topic of corporate R&D and how the world of entrepreneurs can support it. And we'd open up the field to any questions you have about our concept and our overall community here in New York City.
Thanks, Sean. That was a great overview. So, of course, this is a model that I'm passionate, as are you, and we love to talk about it. So I'm excited to kind of zoom out from the process a bit and talk a little bit about how, as this model got started, what were some of kind of the more human moments when we saw exactly how Newlab could start to bridge this gap between having earlier stage startups work with larger companies. So this is more of a kind of a casual chat, more like if we were in the office together, but of course we're on Zoom. But what were some of these moments when Newlab first decided to get involved with corporate innovation partnerships and you knew that this was something that Newlab was very capable of working on?
Yeah, totally. So in the early years of joining, I joined from Google X to come out here to Newlab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And in the first year, a good part of my job was giving tours. Corporate leaders would come to New York. They would ask about what was happening in innovation and R&D. And inevitably, they get told to come visit us in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We're a little bit of a petting zoo of frontier tech. You can walk around 160 plus different companies right here. Teams 3D printing rocket engines or growing leather from collagen, developing electric motorcycles, or growing the future of biodegradable furniture from mycelium. And so people come here with an interest to explore what's happening at the edge of what technology is capable of. At each of those tours, the inevitable question I was always waiting for was, how can I access technologists and entrepreneurs like this to work on our problems, our inefficiencies, our threats to our business, or to improve our overall R&D? And that started to get us thinking, how could we bring together corporate and government bodies with the type of technologists that are based here every day to support their initiatives? And then your second part of the question was, what was some of the early memorable moments? I think they break into three kind of categories if we look at it. One is the research and discovery phase, where what we thought we wanted to work on with the client quickly becomes a very different area of focus. We've had teams come to us saying they want to work on supply chain, as an example, for shipping across the oceans, freight in cargo containers. Yet through 3 months of research, we found out that stink bug infestations actually destroy hundreds of millions of dollars of merchandise in these cargo containers. So what started as an exploration of supply chain digitization suddenly became this intriguing problem of stink bug infestations that destroys equipment, but also has ships sailing across the world only to be refused port entry and then brought back to wherever they left from. Huge impact on wasted fuel and in the environment. So the first has been there's a few of them where we've actually completely pivoted the studio to focus on something completely different than what was originally articulated. And I've always found those really exciting. Then the second has probably been where you find adjacent technologies where they had no idea that what they were building was relevant to a new industry. Cyanide detection systems for bomb detection that are suddenly used for identifying early leaks in mines in India to avoid massive explosions and loss of life. That locating of technology that is not directly applied or designed for a use case, but suddenly becomes incredibly valuable with minor pivots, those are pretty exciting to me, and I love seeing those coming out of the studios. And then the third and final piece is those kind of outcomes of acquisition, license, and investment. We've had companies that have secured investments like CyanoGuard out of our Prospect Mining Studio, where Vimson invested in that organization, or the announcement of a Ghost Robotics partnership with Verizon at CES that came directly out of their pilot here at their innovation studio in the Navy Yard. So it's those outcomes as well that I think give us continued faith that this model has great output with strong ROI and the ability to access 50 to 70 engineers around the world to work on your problems, but at the cost of what 1 to 2 full-time heads will be in your organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think sometimes, at least I've seen just kind of working and speaking around the ecosystem of corporate innovation, a common misconception is that external innovation doesn't always work alongside your organization. So I'm kind of curious to learn more about when Newlab starts to kind of engage with a corporate client. What does the collaboration with existing innovation and venture teams look like, and how does Newlab essentially pick up work that's done to date and carry it forward rather than duplicating any efforts?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's certainly, this is supposed to be complementary and incremental to the existing in-house R&D efforts. That the internal approach to R&D has been clear for some time of getting the best talent around the world to work for your organization, creating a space where they can innovate with long-term vision, but without impact from month-to-month KPIs. Then you want to fund them with a timeline that's different to the typical ROI expectations of your corporate strategy, because you may be working on technology for a decade before it delivers revenue, like the work on the autonomous vehicle that I was part of at Google X. So those efforts have seen success, and there's many who can develop those internal strategies, attract the best talent, fund with patience, create a safe space to innovate and fail. But what if A, you can't get the best talent to work for you full time? What if you don't have that patience of funding from your investors? Or what if you want to add on to that in-house strategy an approach that accesses external talent that doesn't work for you? Your in-house team being the only talent you have access to innovation seems short-sighted. There's a pool of people around the world in academia and early stage ventures that have incredible insights into the products and technologies that may be relevant to your business. Ignoring them seems like a short-sighted approach to innovation.
Mm-hmm. And so one of my kind of questions that I'm always curious just around Newlab, because everyone's working on different projects. I think everyone has those little anecdotes that stick out to them the most. I'm curious for you specifically, what is an actual outcome from one of Newlab's civic or corporate studios that you're especially proud of and you like to talk about?
I think as a Brooklyn resident, like certainly a lot of what came out of the Urban Tech Studio over the last 4 years, that's our longest running studio in partnership with the New York EDC. But that one hit home because I saw the impact of it day to day and got to see how the technology was being deployed in my neighborhoods to make wiser decisions. We close off streets for Christmas fairs or different street fairs throughout the year. And they developed technology with Numina, as an example, that could count and track the impact of those disruptions. Where did the traffic go when you close a main thoroughfare in Brooklyn? How did it impact the use of city bikes or Uber or Lyft or 311 calls? How much did revenue decline going into those stores once car traffic wasn't able to access them? Those type of insights and decisions that impact our daily life were significant for me to watch as it came out of that studio. How long does bags of garbage sit on the sidewalk? How many people cross an intersection every day where we used to count them with clickers? Suddenly technology is deployed that can improve those insights. Companies like Aclima have been testing air quality levels at the zip code level in my neighborhood, figuring out I'm 2 blocks from the BQE, one of Brooklyn's biggest freeways. And that type of test was able to give insights into the air quality at the park where my son and I go every weekend. So watching those tests that had direct impact on my life and were giving insights into the quality of life I have today versus how it could improve, I always liked witnessing the outcomes from that studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love kind of learning more about the civic partnerships that can take shape, especially in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And that's another thing I think is very interesting. The Navy Yard in itself is kind of an amazing place to be, and we've been able to do a lot of great pilots there. Are there any pilots that kind of stick out to you that were unique to being able to run in the Brooklyn Navy Yard that kind of might not have come to life outside of our kind of walls of this campus here?
Yeah, you can't underestimate the value of the Brooklyn Navy Yard itself to what we've done and what entrepreneurs from around New York City are able to achieve here. This is 300 acres of private land that you can test on without the significant difficulty of red tape or cost that might come from other land kind of pilot zones that are available to you. You've got the East River for testing things like amphibious drones and solar-powered buoys in the water. We've got buildings and a road graph that looks like New York City. This is the only place that autonomous vehicles are being tested in New York right now because it is private land versus requiring public approval. We've seen rooftop farming and ag systems to test out how you could produce greater volumes of food right here in Brooklyn neighborhoods. Pipe inspection devices under the buildings. The value of a sandbox to test your technology and actually see its impact in the real world cannot be underestimated. It's one of the most important values here. And the Navy Yard has done an incredible job of developing this ecosystem of players, which Newlab is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also great to see this model also take shape with some of our other partnerships as we kind of expand into other physical locations as well. And so another thing that, as I started at Newlab and we work with a lot of different teams within these large corporations, I'm just curious for you, from your perspective, as we work with venture teams and R&D teams and even innovation teams, how do some of their motivations differ when we sign partnerships with these different groups?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the studio can really have outputs that are valuable to different segments of a corporate entity or government body. The first is you see things like CVC, corporate venture groups, that are actually looking specifically for deal flow, but not only deal flow, but be able to test and test the technology overall to see if it is worth the investment. It's like a whole nother level of due diligence that they get access to through the pilots. So first is you see interest in deal flow and testing out the concept before investing. Then you see people who are literally looking at in-house product development and seeing what external technologies may be relevant to their own strategies. So they're looking for insights to improve their product development, their overall technology approach, versus actually acquiring or licensing an existing technology that's being developed out there. And then the third and final is people who are looking for external partnerships where they want to keep them external, develop a relationship with a company from a procurement perspective, utilize their technology or product, but maintain it as a separate kind of new third-party relationship. And we've seen all of those outcomes come from the studios, and all are equally exciting. So it usually depends on the client, what they're looking to get out of it. And honestly, it's not usually just one. There's usually a combination of different concepts that are of value to them.
Mm-hmm. And just as you were speaking, I saw quite a few people walk by behind you. So I think many people might be curious about why Newlab is kind of seems very active right now. So I think that's a good opportunity to talk a little bit about our return to work kind of venture studio model and how that brought all of these people running around behind you.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, there was probably 300 to 400 people here a day out of our 900 members, but it ebbs and flows depending on the activity of them. Today, we'll probably have 180 to 200 people here. So definitely the volume and traffic is growing. But we had to take a significant amount of steps to make sure they felt safe and comfortable coming into a work environment like this. So if you allow us to step back a bit, like 12 months ago, in March, we were actually preparing to shut down like most businesses in New York. Then the city of New York, the New York EDC, as well as the mayor's office, contacted us and gave us a challenge for our innovation studio framework. This time, instead of 12 weeks, 12 months, they gave us 9 to 10 weeks. But the problem was one that we were so passionate about that we really wanted to see if we could speed up the overall innovation and piloting cycle. The challenge they gave us was around bridge ventilators. They were running out of ventilators in New York City hospitals, cases were on the surge, and brand new fully fledged ventilators with all of the bells and whistles needed are north of $40,000 per unit. Yet what they were looking for was a low-cost bridge ventilator that could maintain life in people while they waited for these larger units if necessary. They gave us a budget of less than $4,000 to develop and build a scaled prototype. And we built a team between us with Newlab, 10X Beta, and Boyce Industries right here in Long Island City, built a new company called Spiro Devices. And in that 10-week period, we rapidly developed a new prototype for a bridge ventilator, then had it tested on animals, had the FDA approve it for emergency use authorization, and then scaled and delivered 4,000 of those units to New York City hospitals. So it was an incredible example to see how we could use the Innovation Studio framework, even in a more rapid timeline, to help solve problems quickly through technologists around the world. But the flip side of that was we had to operate suddenly in a period that we were planning to shut down. 50 to 60 engineers here running 24-hour engineering cycles. And that required us to set up different technologies at the entrances of Newlab. Norbert Health set up heart rate and temperature reading systems above every doorway. We then had strong arm technologies that developed or pivoted their product, which is typically used for factory workers and industrial athletes for maintaining their safety. They pivoted to do contact tracing and social distancing feedback to users so that all of us could wear those sensors that would vibrate if we were too close to another member of the community. But also, if we had a positive case of COVID-19, we could go back and look at everywhere that person went in the building, who they interacted with, how long they interacted with them for, so that we could effectively quarantine the right people and clean the right areas of the building. So it developed another innovation studio for us, but that was focused purely on technology that we could develop to return people to work here in New York in a safe and responsible manner.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite Newlab stories just in general is that whole effort, because it really highlights the fact that it's not consulting, because it's so reliant on a network of advisors and technologists that have subject matter expertise, and it's just getting them all together to actually push a solution forward. So I think that illustrated that really well. I know we did a webinar on that earlier this year, which is on our website and on YouTube to see later. But yeah, that's one of my favorite stories. We're coming up on time, and so I want to give you an opportunity to have any parting thoughts or words of advice for potential corporate clients or startups that would like to get more involved with Newlab. But yeah, I'll pass it over to you for any closing thoughts.
No, thanks for the discussion today. And certainly thanks for everyone for joining us. My email is Shaun@Newlab, SHAUN@newlab.com. So if there's any questions or things you'd like to follow up on, definitely let me know. You can reach different departments on our website. And if you do come to New York City as travel opens up, hopefully in the back half of 2021, please do come and visit us. There's nothing as impactful as actually seeing this community at work and seeing the history of the Navy Yard and how it's been advanced to this new form of manufacturing and innovation. So thanks for having me. Thanks for chatting today, Alexandra. And I hope you enjoy the rest